Within the region of Shadowmoon Valley, an area steeped in perpetual night, where the stars burned overhead and the moon known as the Pale Lady cast its cold glow upon the land, the Orcish Shadowmoon clan made its home, led by a shaman named Ner'zhul. He didn't have a family of his own. The only family he truly had was his wife and his mother-in-law, but both were gone. His wife had died years earlier and he missed her deeply. Her warmth, her strength, everything about her. At times, her spirit would visit him, offering comfort and easing whatever burdens weighed upon his mind. Within Orc society, Ner'zhul was admired and widely respected among the clans, something rare in a culture as fragmented as theirs. He served as an advisor to other shamans across the clans, regardless of allegiance. Unfortunately for Ner'zhul, that very reputation would one day be used against him. Unknown to the Orcs of the time, Gul'dan, the second in command of the Burning Legion, had dispatched his servant Talgoth to observe them. Gathering the information Gul'dan would need to manipulate the Orcs into doing his bidding and enacting the vengeance the deceiver believed was owed to the Draenei. Beyond that, he intended for the Orcs to one day join the Legion and serve as their instrument of the Draenei's destruction. But Gul'dan did not want slaves, he wanted willing servants. To achieve that, he would have to craft a tale the Orcs would believe, one that would stir them to fight with the same fervor they already displayed on the battlefield. When Talgoth learned of this plan, he was furious. He had hunted the Draenei for a millennium, and believed it was his right to end their lives and spill their blood, not the Orcs. He urged his master to reconsider, but Gul'dan would not be swayed. Though he often answered doubt with death, this time he did not strike Talgoth down. Instead, he ordered him to leave Draenor. Begrudgingly, Talgoth obeyed. Now, Gul'dan needed the right instrument. He scoured the land in search of an orc he could shape to his purpose, and he found one, Gul'dan. Born smaller and weaker than the others in his clan, Gul'dan became the target of constant torment. Many believed his frailty was an ill omen. After years of mistreatment, he was exiled from his village. Though he believed no one cared for him, one figure did, the village shaman, who urged him to seek the throne of the elements. Gul'dan, bitter and consumed by anger, ignored the advice at first, but after struggling to survive alone in the wilds, he finally relented and made his way to the throne, desperate for aid. After a long trek, he arrived and fell to his knees within the circle of stones, pleading with the elements to restore him, to give him strength, to grant him power. The elements answered in a beautiful display, merging together before him. As they drew closer and Gul'dan stretched out his hand to receive their gift, they hesitated, and then withdrew. They sensed his rage, his hatred, every festering emotion within him, and rejected him. In that moment of fury and despair, Gul'dan cried out, and in that moment, Gul'dan answered. Before this, Gul'dan had believed he was nothing, that he would always be nothing, but now he was offered something unimaginable. As Gul'dan put it, "You will become a god." And with that promise came the chance to punish all who had ever wronged him. He would become too powerful for anyone to shame or look down upon. All he would have to do was serve the Burning Legion and use the Orcs as the axe that would cleave through the Draenei and bring about their end. Gul'dan had no love for his people, no love for their traditions or customs, and he accepted the bargain without hesitation. He was taught the ways of Fel, how it fed upon life itself, and how to conceal its growing power. He would wield it only when necessary, careful not to draw attention before the time was right. Thus was born the first Orc Warlock. With the first step of the plan secured, Gul'dan turned his focus toward ensuring the Orcs would become desperate, plagued by fear, anger, and loss, so they could be forged into a single unified force. Gul'dan spoke of a time when the Throne of the Elements had been attacked by ogres, forcing the Orcs to unite and restore balance among the elements. Gul'dan wanted that unity again, but this time through abandonment. He needed the elements to turn away from the Orcs entirely. Gul'dan returned to the Throne of the Elements, and his anger, resentment, and hunger for vengeance swelled within him. With a joy he could barely contain, he allowed Gul'dan to guide him as Fel energy seeped into the land. Draenor's elemental furies of fire, earth, water, and air came to the throne in an attempt to stop him. But even their combined strength could not withstand Gul'dan's newfound power. After he dragged them to the brink of death, they were forced to flee. In their retreat began the slow unraveling of the orcs' bond with the elements. With the throne corrupted and the elements thrown into turmoil, Draenor itself began to suffer. The weather turned unnatural. Floods tore through once dry regions of Gorgrond and parts of Nagrand. Snowstorms buried sections of Tanan jungle and Terakar forest beneath ice. Rivers and streams withered away, and wildlife, talbuks and clefthoofs alike, died in staggering numbers. The orcs believed it could not grow worse. They were wrong. Disease spread, water grew scarce, food supplies dwindled. The shamans found themselves powerless, for the spirits were tormented by Fel and didn't answer their calls for help. As if that were not enough, Gul'dan unleashed the Red Pox upon the clans. With no cure and no relief, it became the most devastating outbreak in their history. Ner'zhul was desperate for answers, as were the other chieftains. Led by Ner'zhul, they gathered to discuss what was afflicting their people and how it might be stopped, but their counsel yielded little. When the Kasharg festival ended and the clans prepared to depart, signs of sickness had already begun to appear among them. In an effort to prevent further contamination, Ner'zhul proposed a harsh solution. The afflicted would remain behind in Nagrand, where a village would be built for them. Garad, chieftain of the Frostwolf clan, was among those showing symptoms. Though he did not wish to accept it, he understood that Ner'zhul's reasoning was sound. His son, Durotan, volunteered to remain with him, but with a heavy heart, Garad sent his son home to lead their people. Durotan obeyed. Yet he knew the odds were not in his father's favor. And sadly, he was right. Garad passed only weeks after Durotan departed and the village had been established. Though his time as leader was brief, he guided the afflicted with the compassion and strength they desperately needed. In his honor, the village was named Garadar. As time wore on, violence and desperation spread unchecked across Draenor. Kil'jaeden understood that the clans needed a single leader to unite them. Gul'dan was a capable servant, but he was not a chieftain. Knowing this, Kil'jaeden commanded him to find one who could rally the orcs beneath a single banner. But before that could happen, Gul'dan had to erase his past, ensuring no one would live to speak of who he had once been. He returned to the village that had exiled him and made his life miserable for years. There, he destroyed the settlement completely, leaving no survivors. Never again would he grovel before another. He would forge a world that would grovel before him. As he walked away from the burning ruins of his former home, he knew its name would die with him. Afterward, he traveled to the Shadowmoon clan settlement under the guise that ogres had destroyed his village. The clan accepted him in. Over the following weeks, Gul'dan quietly observed Ner'zhul and the elder shamans, weighing who would best serve his master's design. After careful consideration, he chose Ner'zhul. He had known the chieftain's name, but little else. Watching his interactions with his people confirmed the decision. Ner'zhul was a strong leader, guided by ancestral wisdom, yet he possessed a singular focus. When he set his sights upon a goal, he pursued it relentlessly, at times bordering on obsession. It was a trait the Legion could use, but Gul'dan discovered something more. He learned of Ner'zhul's wife, Wilkan, who had died years earlier. Though Ner'zhul had once made peace with her passing, the suffering brought on by the Red Pox reopened old wounds. The memories returned. In the past, he would have sought comfort through communion with the elemental spirits, but now they were silent. With no answers from the elements, he found himself dwelling in memory instead of guidance. The silence pressed in around him, and despair began to take root. It was in this vulnerable state that Gul'dan moved closer, weaving himself into Ner'zhul's trust. He spoke of the family and friends he had supposedly lost, of grief that lingered like a weight upon the soul. Slowly, Ner'zhul came to see him as a friend. In time, Gul'dan was accepted as his apprentice in the ways of shamanism. With this final piece in place, Kil'jaeden's influence reaching Ner'zhul through Gul'dan, the stage was set. It was time for the orcs to turn their hatred toward the Draenei, and Gul'dan would ensure it happened. The next phase of the plan began with the Bladewind clan, the largest of the orc camps situated near the Draenei city of Shatroth. For decades, tensions between the Draenei and the Bladewind clan had been stretched thin. Orc raiders would strike at Draenei caravans along the roads, capturing or killing those who failed to escape. It was here that Ner'zhul's strong reputation among the clans would begin to work against him. Gul'dan approached the Bladewind clan with a promise. Their suffering, he claimed, could be ended. If they offered blood sacrifices from the Draenei they captured, the elements would return their favor, and the drought would break. After long deliberation, he convinced them that the red pox ravaging their people was the work of the Draenei. Desperation took root. Believing they were saving their clan, they began the sacrifices. Back in Shatroth, Prophet Velen felt his prophetic sight stirring once more. The visions were unclear, fractured, but he sensed something guiding the orcs. A dark force hovered over them, moving them like puppets upon unseen strings. Before he could dwell further on that revelation, scouts arrived with grave news. They had witnessed executions. Among the fallen was Loran, sister of the Vindicator Maraud. When Maraud learned of her fate, he wasted no time. Gathering warriors, he rode for the village. There, among the bodies within the village, he found her. Her blood mingled with the crimson current made by the other sacrifices. Rage consumed him. The sister he had sworn to protect lay dead at the hands of these butchers, and he vowed that those responsible would pay. As Draenei and orc forces clashed, Gul'dan watched from a distance. The pieces were falling into place. Any survivors who attempted to escape were cut down by his hand, ensuring that only one version of the story would survive. And so he shaped it carefully. The Draenei had attacked without cause, slaughtering every soul within the Bladewind camp, man, woman, and child alike. The lie spread quickly, and with it, the first true seeds of hatred among the clans. While this manipulation unfolded, Kil'jaeden turned his attention fully to Ner'zhul. In the quiet hours of sleep, when the world grew still, Ner'zhul would hear her again. Rolkan's voice, soft, familiar, comforting. She told him that the Red Pox was the work of the Draenei, that they sought the orcs' destruction. Yet Ner'zhul hesitated. There had been conflict between the two peoples, yes, but rarely. The Draenei did not seem a race driven by war. Then Gul'dan returned with the news of the Draenei assault upon the Bladewind village. The doubt began to fracture. If the Draenei were capable of such brutality, then perhaps something had changed. Perhaps the spirits had been warning him all along. Still, the clans were fractured and weakened. They could not stand united. Kil'jaeden, disguised as Rolkan, spoke again, telling him he was destined to save his people, that he would lead the orcs to victory. The Shadowmoon clan had always heeded the spirits, and in his grief, in his silence, Ner'zhul listened. Believing himself chosen, he resolved to unite the clans. He sent word to the other chieftains to gather at Ashagun, where they would speak of what had transpired. But Ashagun was no ordinary place. It was the crashed Draenei vessel, the Genedar, and within it dwelled the Naru Quore. Orc spirits were drawn there, gathering in great numbers, and Kil'jaeden ensured none of them would answer. He blocked the true spirits from appearing, and instead, he came in their place. Over the following weeks, the chieftains arrived at Ashagun one by one. Gromosh Hellscream, Kilrog Deadeye, Kargath Bladefist, Blackhand, Fenris, Durotan, and many others. Durotan came with his mate Draka, along with the elder shaman Drekthar. At Blackhand's side stood Orgrim Doomhammer, Blackhand's second in command and one of Durotan's oldest friends. When all had gathered, Ner'zhul spoke of the warning he claimed to have received from Rolkan. He declared that the Draenei sought the extermination of the Orcish race. Many chieftains agreed swiftly, but not all. Chiefs Sugrel and Durotan stood against the call for annihilation. Years earlier, Durotan and Orgrim had walked within Shatroth itself. They had spoken with Velen. They had been offered shelter. The Draenei had not seemed a people bent on genocide. Durotan could not reconcile the shaman's words with what he had seen and experienced personally. But Gul'dan stood firmly at Ner'zhul's side. Through careful manipulation, through whispered fears and stoked anger, he swayed those still uncertain. When the vote was called, the majority chose unity through war. From that day forward, they would be known as the Horde. In the months that followed, Draenei hunting parties were ambushed. Hostility met them wherever they traveled. Velen and his leaders did not fully understand the sudden shift, but they were not blind to the turmoil afflicting the orcs. The elements were in chaos. The orcs were desperate. Even as sacrifices were made in misguided attempts to restore balance, the Draenei sought to avoid widening the bloodshed. Instead, they strengthened their cities. Envoys sent in peace were met with silence or slaughter. Exarch Akama oversaw preparations, and artificers reinforced strongholds such as the Temple of Karabor and Shatroth. They prepared for a coming Legion invasion, unaware that the Legion had already rooted itself deep within the orcs. As the war intensified, so did the toll upon Ner'zhul. Doubt crept in. Rolkan's guidance had seemed righteous, but what had it achieved? The orcs were more violent than ever. The elements remained silent. No matter what sacrifices were made, nothing changed. The world felt wrong. Kil'jaeden sensed the fracture forming within the shaman and altered his approach. In the quiet of night, Ner'zhul once again heard Rolkan's voice. She spoke of powerful beings who could restore balance and grant the orcs victory. Desperate, Ner'zhul pleaded for audience. She agreed, and the following night his wish was granted. That night he was able to speak with the radiant beings, but they were no such spirits. It was Kil'jaeden once more, cloaked in another guise. The being repeated what had been promised the night before. At first, Ner'zhul stood in awe. Yet as the conversation continued, something unsettled him. The spirit before him carried a violence unlike any ancestor he had ever known. Its presence felt wrong. When the vision ended, Ner'zhul made his choice. He would go to Ashagun in secret and attempt to commune with other spirits. Kil'jaeden knew of Ner'zhul's journey. Though the shaman believed he traveled in secrecy, he was never beyond the Demon Lord's sight. It was clear now that Ner'zhul would not be as easily manipulated as once hoped. Doubt had taken root, and doubt was dangerous. So Kil'jaeden shifted his approach. Gul'dan began seeking new allies. At Kil'jaeden's command, he searched among the Shadowmoon for those desperate enough to listen. The first he approached was a shaman named Terran. Gul'dan preyed upon his desire to save his people, demonstrating the raw power of Fel and offering to teach him its ways. Terran hesitated, but the elements had grown silent, and his clan was suffering. In the end, desperation won. He accepted the offer and became the next orc warlock. And he was not the last. Gul'dan moved quietly among the clans, recruiting others who felt abandoned by the spirits. Those who turned were bound not to the clans, but to Gul'dan alone. And this group that he now led would be known as the Shadow Council. Meanwhile, Ner'zhul made the long journey to Ashagun. Upon his arrival, he attempted to commune with the spirits gathered there. Knowing someone would try to commune with the spirits, Kil'jaeden had erected barriers to silence them. But Ner'zhul's connection to the ancestral spirits was strong, and he was able to break through. And the truth came flooding in. The real spirits stepped forward, including Rolkan. Not the false voice he had been hearing, but the true spirit of his mate. They told him he had been deceived. The Draenei were innocent. The true enemy was Kil'jaeden. The Legion's goal was corruption, the annihilation of the Draenei, and the recruitment of the orcs themselves. The revelation shattered him. Then the spirits withdrew, turning their backs on him. Their silence was absolute and crushing to him. Shame consumed Ner'zhul. He had led his people to ruin. He had been manipulated. There was nothing left but regret and the desperate hope that he might yet undo what he had begun. He turned back towards Shadowmoon Valley, head hung low, but hoping he could find some way to stop Kil'jaeden, sabotage him somehow, but he never arrived home. Gul'dan and his followers ambushed him along the road, taking him somewhere no wandering orc would find by accident. Many warlocks argued for his execution, but Gul'dan carried strict orders from Kil'jaeden. The shaman was to live. He would witness what would become of his people, and if he vanished, suspicion would follow. So instead, they broke him. Torture ensured his obedience. Weeks turned into months. The once proud chieftain grew timid, fearful of death. Slowly, he faded from public sight, and Gul'dan stepped forward as the voice and face of the Shadowmoon clan. The Horde turned its attention to Karabor. In one massive assault, they struck. Even with reinforced defenses, even with Velen blessing his warriors and fighting beside them, the Draenei could not withstand the tide. Waves of orcs crashed against the temple walls, siege engines roared, the bombardment shook the foundations. For a moment, it seemed the Draenei might hold. Then, the Shadow Council intervened. Gul'dan's warlocks drew upon the dark star in the sky, siphoning its power. They sensed its strength, though not its origin. The Dark Star was Kiara, a decaying Naru, its void energies vast and unstable, and that power tipped the balance. After the Warlocks gathered their power, they unleashed it upon the unsuspecting Draenei. Before the defenders could react, a massive pillar of void energy crashed down, killing many instantly. Others were driven mad by the sheer force of it. Velen alone managed to hold back the darkness, raising a protective barrier around himself and those near him. Under its shelter, the surviving Draenei fled toward waiting vessels and escaped by sea. The Temple of Karabor was lost. The void energy that scarred it twisted the once peaceful sanctuary, darkening its halls and staining the land itself. From that day forward, it would be known as the Black Temple. And the desecration did not end there. The Horde marched through the fallen city, shattering sacred relics and hunting down survivors. Some were granted swift deaths. Others were taken in chains, interrogated for information, or simply tormented as vengeance against those they now believed to be their mortal enemies. Gul'dan quickly claimed the Black Temple for himself. Publicly, he declared it a place for extracting intelligence from prisoners. In truth, it became the hidden seat of the Shadow Council, where plans were forged far from prying eyes. As the war progressed, Ner'zhul faded further from the orcs he once led. To the Shadow Council, he appeared broken, a relic of a past era. They saw no need to kill him. But he was not as shattered as they believed. He was present for their councils, he heard their plans. Kil'jaeden had intended for him to witness the corruption of his people and be crushed by it. And for a time, it worked. Until he learned of the next step. The orcs were to drink demon blood, specifically the blood of Manaroth, one of the Legion's highest generals. The promise was strength. The reality would be enslavement. That was something Ner'zhul could not allow. When missives were sent to gather the clans once more, Ner'zhul found a way to slip in a secret message. It was directed to the only remaining chieftain who had opposed the Horde from the beginning, Durotan. The warning was simple: do not drink the blood. It will not grant what Gul'dan promises. And once the message was sent, the Shadow Council remained unaware that the fallen shaman had made his quiet move. During the closing days of the Second War, Teyrn Gorfyn and his Death Knights led what remained of the Horde in a desperate retreat following Doomhammer's capture by the Alliance. Terralion and the Alliance forces pursued them relentlessly, hoping the fleeing orcs would reveal the location of the Dark Portal. At that point, the Alliance did not know precisely where it stood. The chase led into the Black Morass, where the Horde made its final stand to buy time. The battle was vicious. Death Knights unleashed necromantic magic upon the Alliance ranks, and it bought the Horde the time it needed. Orc after orc poured back through the Dark Portal, retreating to Draenor. On Draenor, Ner'zhul stood near the gateway as surviving orcs flooded back through in chaos. Among them came figures unlike any he had ever seen. Death Knights, their flesh rotting, their eyes burning with an unnatural glow. He did not know what to make of them. Then one stepped forward and spoke. It was an old ally, Teyrn Gor. Now he called himself Teyrn Gorfiend. Gaz Soulripper stood beside him. Like the others of their kind, they had once been warlocks of the Shadow Council, slain by Orgrim Doomhammer at the end of the First War. Their souls bound into the bodies of fallen knights of Stormwind. There was no time for more questions. The destruction from the Azeroth side reached them. A violent backlash of unstable magic tore outward from the portal. Explosions thundered across the site. Stone pillars shattered and fell. The gateway imploded in a surge of arcane force, nearly crushing those nearby. Ner'zhul among them, until Dentarg, his bodyguard, pulled him clear. The Dark Portal was gone. The orcs were home, but they were stranded on a dying world. Food and water were scarce. Draenor itself was failing. If starvation didn't claim them, then they would turn on each other. Sometime later, Gaz and Teyrn Gor sought out Ner'zhul. He had withdrawn from leadership, becoming little more than a hermit within his own village. When the Death Knights entered and demanded to see him, another orc blocked their path, insisting that the shaman saw no one. The matter, however, was not one that could be ignored. Now fetch your master, lest your arrogance bring you swift death instead. The orc did not waver. Ner'zhul sees no one. Teyrn Gor sighed. A cold stillness fell over the gathered orcs. Swift death then, he said as he unleashed his power upon the unsuspecting orc. Raising his armored hand, he whispered something. The orc was lifted off the ground, gasping for air. As Tarangor tightened his fist, the orc struggled more and more until he stopped moving and was dropped lifeless to the ground. The village erupted into violence. The orcs fought fiercely, but they were no match for the Death Knight's sorcery. Gaz joined the slaughter as Tarangor called out, "If you all die, so be it. I will speak with Ner'zhul." With both hands raised, he cast another spell and the orcs howled in agony, until Ner'zhul himself ordered them to stop. When he emerged, he looked nothing like the chieftain he had once been. He admitted that he had been plagued by dreams of death, dreams of Gorefiend, and whatever hope he once held for the orcs had withered. Guilt weighed heavily upon him. In mourning and shame, he had painted his face with the image of a white skull. At first, Ner'zhul believed the Death Knights had come to kill him. They had not. They had come to restore him. The last time he had led the orcs, it had ended in annihilation and servitude to the Legion. He had no desire to take up that mantle again. But Tarangor brought a new proposal. Reopen the portal to Azeroth, send a small force to recover powerful artifacts, and use them to escape Draenor entirely. And so, after much persuasion, Ner'zhul agreed to listen. Together, they withdrew into his tent to speak further. The plan was daring. 3 artifacts from Azeroth were required: the Jeweled Scepter of Sargeras, the Book of Medivh, and the Eye of Dalaran, representing the Staff, the Tome, and the Seer. These corresponded to constellations in the sky, which aligned only once every 547 years. When that alignment came, and the artifacts were used in concert, Ner'zhul believed he would wield enough power to tear open gateways in other worlds and lead the Horde away from Draenor entirely. But to begin, they needed the Skull of Gul'dan. The skull found its way back onto Draenor, in the possession of Hur'kan's Skull Splinter, chieftain of the Bone Chewers. Aware of its potency, he wore it around his neck as a symbol of dominance and refused to surrender it. Grommash Hellscream attempted diplomacy first, urging the chieftain to join Ner'zhul's cause. When words failed, Grom killed him in combat and reclaimed the skull, turning it over to Ner'zhul. With it in hand, Ner'zhul, Gorefiend, and the Death Knights combined their powers to reopen the Dark Portal. Then a small strike force crossed into Azeroth to retrieve the artifacts. But Ner'zhul had not anticipated one thing. The skull spoke. The voice of Gul'dan, his former apprentice, whispered once more, seeking to manipulate him as he had before. Ner'zhul believed himself wiser now, less vulnerable. Yet even the strongest resolve can erode beneath constant pressure. As Gorefiend hunted the artifacts, the whispers persisted. Ner'zhul resisted them for now, clinging to his own plan. This time he would not be led astray. Sometime later, Gorefiend returned with the artifacts and with an unexpected guest. Deathwing, in his human visage, stood before Ner'zhul in Hellfire Citadel. Ner'zhul was informed that Deathwing's dragons had aided in securing the relics, and without them, the mission might have failed. In exchange, Deathwing had requested that certain cargo be transported safely from Azeroth to Draenor, though he never revealed what it contained. The agreement was honored. But Deathwing's interest lingered on the Skull of Gul'dan. Sensing its power, he declared that since it was no longer needed for the spell, he would like it for himself. Deathwing was not a being to deny. Fighting back the anxiety he felt, Ner'zhul surrendered the skull. He knew refusal was not an option. With the skull in hand, Deathwing departed, and Ner'zhul turned his full attention to completing the spell. He labored over the incantations while Dentar guarded him faithfully. Kilrog Deadeye and the Bleeding Hollow clan stood watch as well. Though the Shadow Moon distrusted the Bleeding Hollow, Ner'zhul respected Kilrog and his warriors. Finally, after months of work, the spell was ready. It required a nexus of powerful ley lines, either at the Dark Portal or the Black Temple. Ner'zhul chose the Black Temple. But he didn't realize the Sons of Lothar had caught his scent as they had at first, tracking his movements across Hellfire Peninsula and Terakar Forest. To evade them, Ner'zhul led his forces through the maze of Auchindoun, slipping beyond the reach of the Griffin Riders. After a long trek, they reached the Black Temple. After setting up what was needed, the ritual began. Portals tore open across Draenor's sky, reality fractured. In that moment, Ner'zhul no longer cared for the Horde, only for power. When Obrys, one of the orcs guarding the ritual, protested and refused to abandon their people, Ner'zhul struck him aside without hesitation. There was no pause, no doubt. In that moment, only the hunger remained. He felt what had fallen away from him, the guilt, the shame, the endless need to save everyone around him. All of it had weighed on him like iron. He had carried it for so long that he had mistaken the burden for purpose. And when he realized he no longer felt it, something inside him broke. He surrendered to the emptiness, and he shouted, "The orcs are lost. They have served their purpose. From this point on, all that we gain will be ours alone. I am the Horde, and I will survive. Choose me or choose death." And with that, he stepped through the portal. The spell spiraled beyond his control. Draenor shattered. Outland remained. The Sons of Lothar followed through the rifts and would be separated for years to come. Upon entering the portal into the twisting nether, he believed he was traveling to a place where he and his followers would find a new home. Instead, he found an eternal torment he had never imagined, as he and his followers were captured by the Burning Legion within the twisting nether. Their new hell had only just begun. Although the Legion's plans had been thwarted with the loss of the Second War, it was not a total failure. Kil'jaeden learned a lesson that would prove invaluable in future invasions. The Horde had failed because they possessed free will. So what if Kil'jaeden could find an army he could control completely? What if he could create a puppet or place someone under his control to command such an army for him? The only thing he needed was a powerful wielder of magic capable of controlling this force. Having witnessed Ner'zhul's power and the vast energies he could command, Kil'jaeden had found his pawn. In order to break Ner'zhul both spiritually and physically, Kil'jaeden subjected him to unimaginable torture at the hands of the Dreadlords, Tichondrius, Balnazar, Deatharok, Mal'Ganis, and Varimathras. They took turns tormenting him. Time lost meaning as his body was torn apart piece by piece, and eventually he begged for death. But Kil'jaeden would not allow him to die. Instead, he offered him a deal. He would be released from this torment only if he pledged eternal servitude to the Legion as their new weapon. Ner'zhul agreed, but death would only be the beginning. Though his mortal form was destroyed, his spirit was dragged beyond it and reshaped into a spectral entity. Upon becoming this entity, his consciousness expanded tremendously, and he gained immense psychic power. His soul was then bound to a suit of armor and a rune blade named Frostmourne. For the final step, they sealed him within a rock-hard prison of ice to contain him. Kil'jaeden promised that if Ner'zhul proved eternally loyal to the Legion, he would be rewarded with a new body to rule over Azeroth, and the armor and blade would remain his. But should he disobey, he would suffer eternal torment once more. Kil'jaeden never intended to keep that promise to the broken shaman. Still, he believed it wiser to grant Ner'zhul hope than to rely solely on threats to maintain control. Although Ner'zhul was not the only one transformed. His followers were raised as undead liches and would serve without question. And thus, Ner'zhul was gone, and the Lich King was born. Within the emptiness and isolation of the twisting nether, where there was no ground or sky to give bearing, Kil'jaeden spoke. The Lich King would create a plague that would cause its victims to rise again as mindless ghouls, serving only him and in turn the Legion. However, he was instructed to start small. He slowly worked to control the icy region of Icecrown. He began with small, isolated tribes in the region, and with other creatures such as Wendigos and Ice Trolls. Once those were securely under his control, he moved on to a race known as the Vrykul. In ages past, they had been a people with a close affinity for the sea and the native proto-dragons of the region. But the curse of flesh changed all of that. Their rage boiled over, and they set out to conquer the world only to be stopped by the dragon aspects who placed them into an eternal slumber until a cure could be found. Generations passed with no cure, and within those stone walls they lay in wait for the day they would awaken. That day would come sooner than they expected. The Lich King found their resting bodies and, as easily as snow buries a forgotten path, cut them down and bound them to his will, bringing them into his vast army and marching one step closer to the invasion of Azeroth the Burning Legion craved. Following the raising of the Vrykul, he turned his attention to a village in Dragonblight on the edge of the region, filled with people simply living their lives. One night, while the village slept, hearth fires burned low and children lay beneath heavy furs, believing themselves safe behind wooden doors and familiar walls. They had no knowledge of the storm gathering beyond their fields, no understanding of the force that had marked them. The Lich King unleashed the plague upon the helpless village, and it moved silently through the air and into their lungs, stealing breath before it stole hope. Within 3 days, mothers, fathers, sons, and daughters fell where they stood, and when they rose again, it was not by their own will. As the Lich King gathered more forces into his vast army, their thoughts and awareness merged with his own. He could feel himself growing stronger than he had ever imagined, his reach extending farther and farther across Northrend and could eventually be toward all of Azeroth. He had to conceal that growing strength from the dreadlords around him and even from Gul'dan himself. After being cast from the twisting nether, he flew through the sky, the wind slowly stripping away the fragments of his icy prison until it finally crashed into the ice-crowned glacier. When it settled, the prison in which he had been sealed now resembled more of a throne. His subjects would build him a mighty citadel from which he would rule. Over time, the dreadlords and his undead forces constructed massive spires with interconnecting walkways wrapping around a central tower where their king sits, waiting for the day he would release his full might upon the people of Azeroth, known today as Ice-Crowned Citadel. The plague continued spreading across Northrend, and once the continent had fallen to the Lich King, he was instructed to strike at the eastern kingdoms. He was told to proceed methodically and ensure that by the time the forces of Azeroth realized what was happening, it would be too late to respond. He followed orders like a loyal servant, but he was not the puppet Gul'dan believed him to be. The Lich King knew that Gul'dan was lying about the promise made to him. The Demon Lord had tortured Ner'zhul relentlessly and played a role in the original downfall of the orcs. The Lich King would not forget that. He made a silent vow to find a way out of this fate and one day exact revenge upon the Demon Lord. With escape from Gul'dan's grasp as his driving goal, the Lich King set his plan into motion. The first step was finding someone who could break him free from his icy prison and work alongside him in his revenge. As the Third War unfolded and the undead wreaked havoc upon Azeroth, one prince caught his attention, Arthas. His zeal to defend his kingdom drew the Lich King's eye, and he intended to use that drive to the prince's disadvantage. Through a series of traumatizing, life-altering events, such as the decision to cull the city of Strathhome because he believed it was the only option, and the killing of the mercenaries he hired to strand his own soldiers in Northrend so that way he could continue his search for the fabled blade Frostmourne, Arthas fell directly into the Lich King's grasp. He gave in to the darkness within himself, and with the prince now a loyal champion, the Lich King set him loose to spread the plague throughout his kingdom. Finally, when the Third War ended with Archimonde being destroyed by an army of wisps who sacrificed themselves to bring down the Defiler, the Night Elves lost their immortality. But the Legion's invasion had been halted. For the races of Azeroth, the war was over. Yet for the Night Elves, another battle still awaited them. They turned their focus to Illidan, Malfurion's brother, believing he sought to destroy Azeroth. They were wrong in that belief, but elsewhere, Arthas still had one final task to complete. Gul'dan attempted to rally his forces. He knew the Scourge could replenish its ranks quickly, and with thousands already under their command, it was only a matter of ordering his trump card to launch a massive assault against the Eastern Kingdoms, and then move on to Kalimdor. He reached out to the Lich King with that command, but was met with silence. In that silence, Gul'dan understood he had been deceived. His pawn was no longer obedient. The Lich King seized the opportunity. Summoning his undead forces in Lordaeron, he ordered them to vanquish the dreadlords who had once been his jailers, Balnazzar, Varimothras, and Deathrok. The dreadlords knew they stood no chance against such a force, so they fled to the Plague Lands, using their magic to conceal themselves until it was safe to re-emerge. Meanwhile, Illidan had consumed the skull of Gul'dan's power. With it came immense strength and forbidden knowledge, and Gul'dan took notice as Illidan transformed into something more than mortal. He became a demon. The Demon Lord believed Illidan might be the instrument to restore his failing plans, but he underestimated him. Illidan's true goal has always been the destruction of the Legion itself, no matter the cost. Though Gul'dan could peer into thoughts, he could not fully discern Illidan's intentions, and when offered the chance to destroy the Lich King while potentially learning more about the Legion's weaknesses, Illidan accepted. After acquiring the Eye of Sargeras, which would allow him to strike at After acquiring the Eye of Sargeras from within the Tomb of Sargeras, which would allow him to strike the Lich King from afar, Illidan began his assault. Drawing upon the ley lines of Dalaran, he channeled the Eye, arcane energy coalescing around him as he unleashed volley after volley toward the frozen throne. His allies held back the undead while his magic battered the icy prison. At last, a shard of the frozen throne broke away. A few more strikes and the Scourge might have fallen. But the combined forces of the Night Elves and Blood Elves intervened. They disrupted the ritual. Forced to retreat, Illidan fled to Outland to recover, intending to strike again. Though this spared the Lich King in the moment, he knew his situation was dire. His power was fading, and with it, Arthas' strength waned as well. He needed to merge with his champion to get his power back and continue his long game against Kil'jaeden. As Arthas weakened, Sylvanas Windrunner seized her chance. She sought vengeance against the one who had slain her and twisted her into what she had become. She intended to make his death slow and painful. Yet just as she prepared to strike, Kel'Thuzad intervened, rescuing the fallen prince and delivering him to safety so he could regain his strength and continue his journey north toward the frozen throne. At last, Arthas reached the final stretch of his ascent. He needed only to enter the citadel and climb to his master. Charging atop his steed Invincible, snow whipping past him in the frozen wind, he rode toward the open gates. But from the sky, Illidan descended, crashing to the earth with wings outstretched as he blocked Arthas' path. Arthas warned him to leave Azeroth and never return, promising that if he did, he would be waiting. Illidan refused. He had sworn to finish what he began. The battle began, and it was fierce. Demon Hunter against Death Knight, one sought to save the world, the other to bend it to ruin. Steel clashed against Warglaive. Finally, a powerful blow carved across Illidan's back, forcing the realization that this fight had to end quickly. With a roar and no more restraint, he unleashed his full demonic form. Black smoke poured from him, tattoos blazing, eyes burning with fury. Rising above the battlefield, he loomed over Arthas. Arthas only smiled. Gripping Frostmourne with both hands, he felt its cold power surge along the blade. As he closed the distance, the rune blade flared, and their energies collided. When the dust settled, Illidan lay defeated, but spared. The Lich King's command echoed in Arthas' mind: "Ascend the citadel." At last, Arthas stood before the frozen throne. Encased within the ice rested the armor that housed Ner'zhul's spirit. The voice in his mind urged him to don the helm so they might merge as one. Without hesitation, Arthas shattered the ice, took up the helm of domination, then placed it upon his head. In that instant, their spirits collided. They became one, the Lich King, one of the most powerful beings Azeroth had ever known. But Ner'zhul had miscalculated. Arthas' will proved dominant. The prince's spirit pushed what remained of the orc shaman to the back of his mind, and he would just have to watch as Arthas carried on. Ner'zhul, who had once plotted revenge and freedom, found himself trapped within the armor, diminished and powerless, unable to enact the vengeance he had long desired. And to add insult to injury, Ner'zhul would never get to enact that vengeance, as Arthas would be defeated by adventurers years later, thus ending Ner'zhul's legacy on Azeroth. Following Arthas' death and the fading of Ner'zhul's spirit, a fragment of their history surfaced when the Legion launched its invasion once more. A Death Knight ventured into the reforged blade of the fallen prince, crafted from the shattered remnants of Frostmourne itself. Within the blades, the Death Knight encountered echoes of Arthas and Ner'zhul. It was not a living scheme, but a memory, replaying the moment Arthas first took up Frostmourne. Ner'zhul's voice urged him that it must be done. Arthas agreed, yet before claiming the blade, he noticed the presence of the intruding Death Knight. The memory shifted. A brief battle followed, more reenactment than true struggle. As Arthas fell to the final strike, he confessed that he only saw darkness before him. Ner'zhul's voice rang out in frustration, not as a present will, but as an echo of the choice that had sealed both their fates. With the memory dispelled, the Death Knight emerged from the blades and claimed them as their own. The blades of the fallen prince returned against the Legion. Perhaps for the final time, the demons would set foot upon Azeroth in such force. Within the Shadowlands, it was revealed to the adventurers that the Lich King had been meant to herald the coming of the Jailer. When Ner'zhul failed to fulfill that purpose during his time in control of the armor, the Jailer viewed it as the greatest failure of any who had wielded the Helm of Domination. As a result, when Ner'zhul's soul made its way into the Maw, he was subjected to the harshest punishment the Jailer could inflict. Within the Maw, what remained of Ner'zhul's soul was encased in spiked shadow steel, condemned to unending torment. Only after he was defeated, when the helm, gauntlets, and the rattle cage of agony were shattered, was the final remnant of Ner'zhul revealed. As he faded, he uttered his final words. "Ah, Rolkan, I come home." And with that, Ner'zhul was finally granted rest. His life had become a chain of suffering, one torment after another. But it began with an orc who only wished to help his people. Over time, ambition and desperation cost him everything, and the path he chose led him not to power or freedom, but to endless agony. And that's going to do it for this one. Hopefully y'all enjoyed. Thanks for checking it out, and please do take care of yourself. I'll see you in the next one.